This is Nick Black, and I'm in Los Angeles, California, and today I'm talking to Ray Manzarek. And of course, Ray is best known for being a member of The Doors, but he's also a filmmaker, a record producer, and probably a lot of other things. But now he's an author, and he's just released his new book called Light My Fire, My Life with The Doors, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be with you.
Okay, first thing I want to ask, Ray, is there have been a lot of other Doors books, and you finally released yours. Why so long?
Well, I guess it was too late. You know, it's too late. So what else can I say other than everybody thinks they know all the stories about the Doors, and I should have capitalized on the Doors buzz around the time of the movie. Certainly John Densmore did a brilliant job of doing that with his book Riders on the Storm. But I thought it would have been a bit tacky to try to capitalize on that whole thing. So I thought it best to let the hubbub and let the furor die down. And I wanted to write a book. Actually, I wasn't going to write the book until the 21st century. I thought I'd wait until the 21st century when we as a nation here in America and perhaps as a world begin to become a bit more psychedelic. I don't think we can continue with the same rapacious pace we're on now, the capitalist rapacious rape of Mother Earth. I think we're going to undergo a serious transformation in the next year or two, and a transformation of consciousness, which is going to kind of take us back to a 60s style consciousness. But for those of you who hate the 60s, have no fear. It won't be, it won't be a tie-dyed future. It'll be a future in the 21st century that'll be more conducive to, and I know you hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway, to love. Love, harmony, peace, integration of the races. I know you're going to hate to hear this one too, but hey, this is how we think here in California. Integration of the races. Perhaps even, you may have to cut this out of the show, perhaps even an interbreeding of the races. Sexually coming together of disparate races. I know this is anathema to the white race, but it's inevitable. You know, the hell of it is, it's inevitable. So I thought I would write the book for the 21st century for that kind of consciousness. But I just couldn't take it anymore. It was a premature ejaculation, a premature mental ejaculation, and I just had to get it out. I sat down to write one day, and it was just such fun being with John and Robbie and Jim again and reliving all the great memories. So I thought, I've got to put this down. Plus the Oliver Stone movie and the various books that are out there now, 90% of them, nobody was there, they weren't there, they're hearsay, they're innuendo, they're made-up fantasies, The Witch Who Married Jim Morrison, and then there's some book that just came out recently about Jim and Pam that was incredibly tacky, and the Oliver Stone movie was tacky, so I thought, I'm going to have to tell the true story about Jim Morrison, The Doors, Ray Manzarek, Venice Beach, California, UCLA, and what is psychedelic? The Doors are the kings of acid rock. What the devil is that LSD experience all about? So that's why I wrote the book.
You're writing the book, about 25 years after the Doors officially broke up, and 27 and a half years now since Jim died. Why do you think the Doors have lasted so long? I mean, I was just walking down the street on La Brea, and there's this huge mural of Jim Morrison. I mean, it's still going. Why?
Well, what can I say from my perspective? We'd be a lot better off if we had like a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. I think it kind of ends off at 60. I don't know whether or not Doors fans are 65 years old, but we could even get a 10-year-old, and we'd ask each one of those, and I think that would give us an answer. Because for me to give the answer, I'm in the Doors. I am, the Doors circle around each other. The four of us are, the locus, of the spiral. I mean, that we are the Doors. I can't tell you why the Doors music is important to you or to anybody else. I can tell you from my perspective, it's a music of rhythm, it's a music of darkness, of surrender, of moodiness, but it's also a music I find of great joy. For instance, the solos of Light My Fire, the solo sections are absolutely transcendent. It just takes you to a high, and it just keeps on going and going and going and going. So for me, there's a real transcendental quality to Doors music. But to try to answer your question, I did talk to a young chap once, and we were in New York City, and some Doors business or other was going on, and a fan was there, and he was maybe 18 or 19, and I said, what do the Doors represent to you? I said, why are you a Doors fan? What do the Doors mean to you? And he said, man, Ray, I can sum it up in one word: freedom. Freedom. So I think very possibly the Doors have that sense of freedom about them, representing not so much an anti-establishment, but another way of being, that you don't have to be a fundamentalist. You don't have to be a political fundamentalist, an educational fundamentalist. You don't have to be a conservative. You can be free. You don't have to be a religious fundamentalist. You can throw away the Judeo-Christian Muslim myth. You can step beyond it into a new realm, into a realm of absolute, clean, pure light. And Australia is bathed in that light. Like when I got to Southern California from Chicago, the light is what just absolutely zapped me. And you guys have exactly the same thing down there. When I was down there in Melbourne and in Sydney, I was amazed at the light of Australia, that the intensity of it. That the Doors transcend time, space, and thought to enter that light. That's what the Doors are for me, and the Doors were freedom for this young man.
Just getting back to what you were saying before, do you think now there's less freedom for the individual?
Yes and no. There's a lot more freedom because of what happened in the 60s. There's a lot more integration. There's a lot more love. I mean, black people in America can actually sit down and eat next to a white person in the South. You couldn't do that before. There's all kinds of women are in the marketplace. Women are getting a fair shake. Boy, before this revolution, the psychedelic revolution of the 60s, women's jobs were, to stay at home and take care of the family, which I highly advise women to do. But if they are going to enter the marketplace, the workforce, then they should be paid an equal wage with a man, unless they're chopping down trees by hand or something, or, and even a woman can do that these days. So a great deal of freedom for people of other races and for women, and it's marvelous. But I think we put on the psychic chains, the psychic bonds that bound our hearts here in America in the 50s. See, I grew up in the 50s. I know what the 50s are all about. And it was a fundamentalist time. Other ways of thought were not even considered. I mean, getting high was not even considered. The only people who got high, smoked a little reefer, were jazz musicians and beatniks. And the occasional black person that was associated with those people. Anybody, there was never any, you couldn't get high anywhere. So, you can do that in America now. Not legally, of course, but it certainly is available to you. But we put on the psychic bonds of what was going on in the 50s. We're fundamentalist. We're afraid to step into the future. We are completely beholden to the Jerusalem religions, all three of them, depending on which one you adhere to. And we're afraid. We're afraid of the 21st century. We're afraid of the abandonment of the Piscean age, and we're afraid to welcome in the age of Aquarius that's coming. The age of Aquarius, it might sound like hippie stuff, folks. Don't turn off your radio. The age of Aquarius is, in fact, coming. Every 2,000 years we go through an astrological cycle, and we're leaving now the cycle of the fish, Pisces. That's why the Christian symbol of the fish, that's the Piscean age. We are about to enter the electrical energy of the Aquarian age, and quite frankly, I can't wait, man. I am just so tired of, I cannot believe, nor would Jim Morrison believe, the state of America from 1967-68 to 1998-99. It is a travesty.
You mentioned Oliver Stone before. The reason why I didn't like the film was the fact that Morrison was just a one-dimensional character. And also the title was a bit misleading, The Doors. It was really Jim Morrison. So what overall, Ray, do you think, besides being generally tacky, as you mentioned, what do you think was the problem with that, because it got a lot of publicity.
It's a great slagging of Jim Morrison. He just dumped all over Jim Morrison. It's like he turned Morrison into, as you say, a one-dimensional drunk. You know, just this kind of guy who wobbles around and spouts poetry, you know. Poets don't do that, man. Poets sit down and write poetry. They don't all of a sudden start talking poetry and, he's on acid, man. It was ridiculous. It was like a person, Oliver Stone was a white powder man, you know. He doesn't know anything about LSD. He doesn't know anything about the psychedelic 60s. He was in Vietnam, you know. He's a warrior, you know. Let's give him that delightful term of warrior. I say killer and fascist and bonehead, you know. And he's a white powder man. So how is a white powder man going to make a movie about the psychedelic acid head kings of acid rock? He just blew it. It was terrible what he did to Morrison. Morrison's a much more multidimensional character. That's really one of the reasons I wrote the book Light My Fire, My Life with the Doors, available in Australia now. If you're listening, you know, hie thee out to the store and bookstore, and please. People said to me, "Where can I buy your book, Ray?" I said, "Well, how about a bookstore?" Okay, and it's called Light My Fire, and I slag Oliver Stone in kind. So you know, I was very disappointed in the movie. However, Val Kilmer did a good job. Val Kilmer was very good in his portrayal. The music is great, and Oliver Stone did get the name of the band right. So we'll give him that.
What did you think of Kyle MacLachlan's wig there, right?
Yes, Kyle's wig, and Kyle, for God's sake, man, let your hair grow for the part. Do you have to really wear a wig? And the turtlenecks. I never wore a turtleneck, folks. A turtleneck and the peace medallion. He's wearing a medallion. I said, that's it. Make me into Sammy Davis Jr. You know, that's what the swingers in Vegas did, in Las Vegas, when they finally got hip to the new mod young thing. I mean, what was that? Mod Ray Manzarek. There he is in his wig and turtleneck and jewelry. It was, oh, God, I was so embarrassed. It was so disappointing. But, you know, some of the movie's good. Some of the movie's very exciting. The rock and roll scenes are very exciting. The riots are exciting. Oliver Stone handled the stage beautifully. Handled the music, handled the stage. All of that is great. The story is cuckoo. You know, Jim lighting the fire, Pamela's, he locks his girlfriend Pam in a closet and sprays it with lighter fluid and lights it on fire. This never happened. The end of the movie, there's a party. You'll love this. The end of the movie is a party going on. It's a children's birthday party. Jim's going to be leaving for Europe. We're all there. He's come to the birthday party of my daughter, Dorothy, and my daughter, Princess. It's a party for Princess. My next-door neighbor said to me, he said, old Irv, he said, "Ray, you know, I see your son Pablo around, but I saw the movie, whatever happened to Princess?" And I said, "Irv, guess what? There never was a princess. We have no daughter. We only have one child, and he was born in 1973. There was no children's party. There was no princess. None of it. That was entirely made up." And I thought, why did he have to do this? Why do you have to make up stories about the Doors when the Doors are so fabulous? I mean, the stories are so insane and wild and crazy. I mean, my God, wait till you read the Andy Warhol, Nico, and Jim Morrison story and what went on between Jim Morrison and Nico in my book. You're going to love that story. That's not in the movie. So much of it's not in the movie. Really, the trial's not in the movie. The trial was great. I said to Oliver Lane, let's build it around the trial. We can go backwards and forwards in time with Jim Morrison on trial, rock and roll on trial for obscenity in America. And he said, "This isn't a trial movie, Ray." And, you know, God, you know, there was no talking to him. I talked to him and talked to him. He didn't hear. I mean, Oliver Stone is the perfect name. So he just did a very bad job, and I was really disappointed and really ashamed of what he did. So was Bill Graham, who called me like 2 days after he saw the movie, and he said, "Ray," Bill Graham, the impresario from San Francisco and the Fillmore and all of that, he was one of the co-producers. And Bill Graham said, "I'm sorry, Ray. I'm really sorry, because what he did to the 60s, first of all, what he did to Jim and you guys, and what he did to the 60s was a travesty." And Bill said, I wasn't there. I was sick. Bill was sick for the whole time of the shooting. He said, I I just couldn't be there and he said, I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry. So I had to love Bill Graham for that. It was, he was a great man. Bill Graham was absolutely playing the Fillmore in San Francisco in the psychedelic 60s, 1967, the Fillmore. Holy cow. That was amazing. I can't even begin to describe it or explain it. It was psychedelic, brilliant, and Oliver Stone did a good job with that. So we'll give him that. The rock and roll scenes are great, the name of the band is correct, and the music is fantastic. So the rest of it is jive and a white powder movie, and Oliver had this strange, dare I say, unnatural fixation on Jim Morrison's leather pants. One begins to think of a love that perhaps dare not speak its name. But I shan't go any further. Enough said.
All right, Ray. Thanks for that little critique on the Doors. I want to ask you about Morrison. You know, when you first met Morrison, did he have the charisma that he had by when the Doors were successful? I mean, when you first met him, you know, is this guy something different, or was he just a normal guy? And
you know what? He has more charisma today than he had when he was alive. And when he was alive, he didn't have that much charisma. Only in retrospect now do you view him as this rock icon, this rock god. When I first met Jim Morrison, I met him at the UCLA Film School. He was another student. He was a pothead, and he was a very literate guy and extremely well-read, perhaps one of the best read people what a collection of books, man. I've never met anybody that had as many books as he did. So he was very literary, great deal of fun to talk to, fun to get high with, was hip to jazz, and was really a blues man, loved his blues and rock and roll. And God, when we first met, the Beatles were coming across. It was like, 1964, so the Beatles had invaded America. The British invasion had happened, and we were in California watching the British invasion. The Beatles, the Stones, Eric Burden, the Animals, the Kinks, the Who, I mean, group after group after group. You were just, God, great music was being made by a bunch of young guys just like ourselves. So when I reconvened with Jim, that was at UCLA, when I reconvened with Jim on the beach in Venice, after he was going to New York and I was going to stay in LA after we graduated, he had been writing songs. That's how the Doors got together. He'd been writing songs while he was here in LA in that period that I wasn't with him. And he sang some songs to me on the beach in Southern California. And I heard Moonlight Drive for the first time, and he also did My Eyes Have Seen You, and he also did Summer's Almost Gone. And I heard those words and I thought, this is fabulous. This is just, nobody's doing this. Because the Beatles at the time were teeny boppers. They were doing She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they were like the four mop-top lads, and their audience was, quite frankly, was children, young girls, barely post-pubescent girls. And that was their audience. The Rolling Stones were dark and dangerous, and they were the anti-Beatles, the Antichrist personified. And we felt much more of a kinship with them. But quite frankly, they were doing Chicago blues. Basically, I was from Chicago. I knew the blues inside and out. That meant nothing to me. So we had the Beatles doing Everly Brothers harmony, being teeny boppers, the Rolling Stones doing Chicago blues, and then Jim Morrison on the beach in Southern California, middle of July, 1965, sang these songs to me. And I heard, let's swim to the moon, let's climb through the tide, penetrate the evening that the city sleeps to hide. And I thought, ooh, cool words, psychedelic. We were both acid heads. Psychedelic, ooh, I can do like Jimmy Smith organ or Ray Charles kind of funky kind of organ, and we need a guitar player, a good jazzy guitar player, and a good kind of jazz rock drummer, and God, we could make some great music out of this. And I said to him, we got to get a rock and roll band together. And he said, that's exactly what I had in mind, Ray. And I said, man, we're going to make $1 million. This is going to be incredible. And I said, but there's only one problem. I said, what do we call the band? And he said, well, The Doors. And I said, The Doors? That's the most ridiculous name I've... Wait a minute, I said, The Doors in your mind, like the doors of perception? He said, exactly, Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. We are the Doors. I said, oh, God, there are things known, there are things unknown, and in between. And he said, are the Doors. That's it, right on. We are the Doors of perception. Of course, we won't call ourselves Up Perception, but that's what it's all about, the Aldous Huxley book. And then I looked at him, and he was still Jim Morrison, but there had been a slight transformation. He had gone from the student when he weighed about 165 pounds down to about 135 pounds, and he looked great. His hair was starting to grow out in ringlets, and I saw in him the potential. The butterfly had begun to emerge from its cocoon, and it was a glorious butterfly. Whether he had the charisma at that point, I don't think he did. I don't think anyone else would have, said, there's a rock god in the making. I, however, had been in rock and roll all my life. I'd been playing rock and roll since the 50s. I heard the whole thing in the 50s. I started playing rock and roll when I was 16 years old, doing Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard kind of stuff on the piano. So I had always been in rock and roll and knew it inside out, upside and down, knew my jazz and classical, of course, from my studies. But when I looked at Jim, I thought, this guy's got it. This guy's got it. He's handsome. He's got a bone structure that just won't quit. And since he had lost like 30 pounds down to 135, he was lean and hard, wearing cut-off Levi's. He had a rippling abdomen, cut shoulders, lean, hard jawbone, and he was looking good. And I thought to myself, after I heard the words, first of all, I was happy to see him. Then I heard the words. Then we talked about the rock and roll band. And then I looked at him and I said, you know what, to myself, this guy's going to be a star. The girls are going to fall madly in love with this guy. And that was like that was the cherry on the top. The music was going to be good. I was in charge of that. I knew it was going to be good. The words were incredible. The songs were incredible. All of that was going to be, the art of it was going to be incredible. And Jim Morrison had the handsome good looks. And then his charisma began to develop. Once he got on stage, and the girls fell in love with Dionysus, the Maenads fell in love with Dionysus, that's when the charisma really developed. So as he progressed in his career, he became more and more and more charismatic.
In other words, he got more confidence in himself.
Yeah, I think that's right. He got the confidence in himself. He began to project outward. I think that's what it is. That's what, in a way, charisma is nothing more than a projection outward of what you have inside of you. And if you have anything inside of you, then you're going to be called charismatic. You've got to have something to begin with. Jim Morrison had the brains, very smart, very high IQ. He was very well read, and he was a damn fine poet. So that's what he was projecting. And then he became a lead singer. Up to that point, he was not a lead singer. He was embarrassed. He didn't even want to sing his songs to me. He said, I don't have a voice, Ray. I said, Jim, sing. Just sing, man. It's just you and me. And he was right on the pitch, and he had a soft, whisper-haunted Chet Baker kind of voice, and he was right on pitch, so I knew everything was going to work out fine, in the recording studio. And here we are, like 35 years later, and we're still talking about James Douglas Morrison, poet, rock star.
Before this fateful meeting in Venice, because you knew him beforehand from school, did he ever mention any of this writing, or did you know?
I knew he was a poet. I had read some of his poetry. He knew I was a musician. I played with my brother's rock and roll band, a surf band, one of the great undiscovered garage surf bands of Southern California. For all you Australian guys, Rick and the Ravens, you got to check out if you can find any old records, and they do exist. It was on Aura Records, a subsidiary of World Pacific, my brother's surf band, Rick and the Ravens. So Rick was my brother. I wasn't the lead singer. I was like the guest who would come up and sing some songs at the end of the set. And we played a place called the Turkey Joint West in Santa Monica. And Jim and the guys from the UCLA Film School would come down, and they would come on stage and sing every once in a while. I would entice the drunken Jim Morrison, come on up here, you loudmouth, come on and sing. He's requesting Louie, 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 Louie. I said, you sing, you Louie, Louie. Come on up here, ladies and gentlemen. In the audience from the UCLA Film School, Jim Morrison. They'd give him a big round of applause, and he'd get on stage and sing Louie, Louie. I think that's probably what got him hooked in the first place. So he knew I was a musician. I knew he was a poet, but I knew nothing about the songs. He had never written a song until that period when we graduated, dated like, end of May 1965. He went up onto Dennis Jacobs, a good friend of ours, mutual friend, filmmaker. He went up onto Dennis's rooftop and stayed there for the biblical 40 days and 40 nights, living on LSD in his baby fat, losing, a good 25 pounds over a 40-day period, and hallucinating and creating songs, creating the Doors in his mind, seeing himself as a lead singer of a rock band at singing in front of 20,000 people. He envisioned that, and he wrote those songs down. So when he came to me and I said, "Hey, what have you been up to, man? Good to see you. I'm glad you didn't go to New York. What's been going on?" And he said, "I've been writing songs." And I went, boing, writing songs. A poet. He's a good poet. Let me hear the songs. And that's how it happened. It was a complete surprise to me.
Speaking of books, when I spoke to John when he released Riders on the Storm, he said that even if Jim did something completely different, he thought that he'd be a success at it. Would you agree?
Jim Morrison could only have been a success at being an artist. He could have only been... Jim Morrison was destined to be the lead singer of The Doors and a poet. That's what Jim Morrison was. That was his destiny. I don't think Jim Morrison could have done anything else. I think he could only have done... He could only do lead singer / poet. That's exactly what he was. That's what he was born to do, and by God, he fulfilled it. He fulfilled that destiny, except that destiny also contained, in the 60s, and still does today, it contains a trap. It contains a tragic flaw. Fulfilling that destiny, you may have to sacrifice your body. You may have to sacrifice yourself. You may have to sacrifice this mortal life to attain that immortality. And unfortunately, that's what Jim Morrison had to do, as have Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Kurt Cobain and so many others. A tragic part of rock and roll, and fulfilling the rock and roll destiny of stardom, or the rock and roll stardom destiny, is that it contains the seeds of your own destruction. And that's the myth that Jim Morrison lived out. That's the tragic myth. I'd give it all up, man, if he was still alive. God, I'd go, all the income, all the fame, all the notoriety, all the, the rock gods. I would give up all of that and say, for Jim Morrison to be alive today. God, I miss that guy. We had fun. Let me tell you, that's what I hated about the Oliver Stone movie. We had fun. It was a good time in the 60s. I'm here to tell you, folks, as a survivor of the 60s, they were great. They were fun. We were high. We made love, not war. We were going to change the world. And Jim Morrison was on the front lines of the whole thing, man. God, it was fun.
Well, at the end of the book, Ray, I'm not really a sentimental fellow.
Who is?
Who is? But it was very moving when you described how you miss him. So, obviously, it probably left a big, not only financially and from professionally, but personally as well, is a big hole.
Yeah. A big loss. It was one of, it's a profound loss. Yeah. I mean, for him he was only 27, but interestingly, he was 27. You know how old Brian Jones was? 27. Janis Joplin, 27. Jimi Hendrix, 27. Kurt Cobain, 27. What is it about 27? The 7 and 2, numerologically, for those of you who are into numerology, obviously 2 and 7 equals 9. You add up those two figures together. 9 is the ultimate number. There is no other number beyond 9. All numbers are then combinations of those 9 digits, including the 0, the 10 digits. So Jim made it to that 9 as all the others did. 27 must be, in terms of numerology or psychology or psychically, it must be a transitional point. It must be a transition between one lifetime or one age of man and the next. It must be the transition between youth and adulthood, and they weren't able to make it out of their youth. They had stretched their youth to the furthest point, 27 years old. Now, 28, you must begin to become an adult. and they just couldn't do it. That's the tragedy. Great artists, and the world is a greater loss. My God, imagine if Hendrix was still around, Janis Joplin singing the blues, Kurt Cobain still writing, Brian Jones with the Rolling Stones would have been magnificent. But that's the tragedy of life, and certainly for me, losing Jim Morrison was, the greatest tragedy of my life. But being with him for that time, that 5-year period, was the joy of my life too. So there's the yin and the yang, the good and the sweet. You have to take the bitter with the sweet, the black and the white, the up and the down, the light and the dark. I had 5 years with Jim Morrison that were they fun. The tragedy of my life is that I only had 5 years with Jim Morrison.
Just going back on the Chinese numerology thing, I did do it. Ray invited you to do it, add up all the digits of your ages, and I have noticed that probably for a very long time that you have been into, I don't know, maybe Buddhism, but I'm specifically referring to Peking King and your Queen, but you do have fascination with the East or Eastern mythology. How did that come about?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose that getting in tune with the East was LSD. Opening the doors of perception, standing on the beach in Venice, California, and looking at the setting sun setting into the Pacific Ocean. And Morrison would say, "See that sun?" Yeah, of course. He said, "It's setting." You know where it's setting? I said, "Where is it setting?" Just to hear him say it. It's setting over Asia. It's the end of the day here, and it's the beginning of the day in Asia. And consuming LSD made me realize that it was a globe, and that we were all one, we were all equal, we were all divine entities. And I began to search within Christianity for that idea of enlightenment. And I, quite frankly, found it nowhere in Orthodox Christianity, nor really in Orthodox Judaism either. And then I read some writings from the East and realized that the Buddha, etc., the whole point of the Buddha is to make you all become Buddhas. Buddha's, the act of Buddhahood is not confined to the Buddha, because we can all be, that was the whole point of it, we can all be the Buddha. And I said, that's exactly it. That's the way I see it too. We can all be enlightened. And many Christian mystics and many Jewish mystics and the Sufis and Islam and enlightenment enlightenment is open to all human beings, all men, all women, and it is the proper birthright of all men, all women. That is the journey that we are on, to rise above ourselves, to rise beyond, to uncoil the kundalini within us, to uncoil the serpent power, or to break on through to the other side. And the other side is not this three-dimensional reality, but an infinite reality in which we are the creator is us, and we are all one, and it all becomes divine, delicious, and an incredible amount of fun. Oh, God, that's the whole point of it, man, just really having some good, serious fun. So I suppose LSD made a Buddha, or made a Buddhist out of me.
Finally, Ray, I just quickly want to get on to Pam. What I basically want to know is just a quick impression of Pam. And were they good for each other, or did they just drag themselves down? What do you think from your viewpoint?
The answer to that question is yes. Yes, it was heaven and hell. My God, they loved each other, and God, they tore at each other's, I'm going to rip your throat out, yeah, well, I'll rip your heart out. And then they were just lovey-dovey with each other. What a volatile relationship. It was inflammatory. They were divinely made for each other. They were two shooting stars, two redheads. Pale of, Jim wasn't a redhead, Pam was a redhead. They were pale of skin. They were of, the same ethnic ancestry, and they were just made for each other. They were just each other's opposite, and volatile as hell. What a relationship! It was hysterical. To see the two of them in love was delightful. To see the two of them fighting with each other was just. It was hysterical. They were so volatile. It was totally insane. And the tragedy is that the two of them went to Paris, and they should have gone to London. They had a flat in London after we did our European tour. They took a flat in London, in Belgravia. It was wonderful, too. Completely furnished. even with books. There was even a bookcase with books, and Squire Morrison and Milady Curzon were just so at home there. Dorothy and I went over and they made breakfast for us. It was hysterical. It took them an hour to make some scrambled eggs. You could hear the two of them fighting in the kitchen, but by God, they did it nonetheless. The toast was good and the coffee was good and the eggs and the rashers of bacon and then just a great imported Polish strawberry jam, and it was absolutely delightful being. I talk about that episode in my book, Light My Fire. And being with them was just so delightful. Then they'd get back to Los Angeles, and Jim would be off with his ne'er-do-well drinking buddies, the Santa Monica Mafia, like Elvis Presley's the Memphis Mafia. Jim had his Yes Men and his Laughers, the La Cienega, the Santa Monica Mafia. And he'd be off with them, and Pam would just be angry as hell. He'd be doing his midnight creep. He'd never come home. And she was just absolutely so angry with him. You could see this red head just starting to turn beet red. Finally, she got him to Paris. And I thought it was great. I thought Jim getting away from all of those guys, all of the girls, getting away from rock and roll for a while, go relax, go to Paris, write An American in Paris, Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Henry Miller, and now Jim Morrison. I love that poetic tradition that he was in. Pam was there. I thought, oh, this is going to be great, man. This is just going to be marvelous. Instead, Jim Morrison made it, lasted for about approximately 4 months in Paris, and that was the end of him. Gone. And Pam was delightful. I loved her. I thought she was great. She was great. She wasn't too bright. Pam was not the most intelligent thing, but she had she had a good heart, and she was very good for Jim and wanted nothing more than, can't we live like Ray and Dorothy do, a little more normal? They've got a house and it's got all the art and they do all kinds of things, and why can't we do that too, Jim? Come on, Jim, let's get married. It was so easy for Ray and Dorothy. Jim and Pam were our best maid and our best man and maid of honor, and we went to City Hall, and boom, we were married in like 15, 20 minutes at City Hall, and she loved that idea and just was always after Jim too. And he would never marry her. Why he wouldn't marry her, I have no idea, but she always wanted to just kind of settle down with him and take care of him. So she was good for him, but man, were they volatile. And something happened in Paris that we're never going to know what happened in Paris.
Exactly, because both of them are long dead now. Finally, Ray, I just want to get up to the present and the future. I just want to ask you, we keep hearing about film projects that you might or might not be involved with. Just generally, what are you going to be up to?
Okay, here's what went on, as a matter of fact. We're sitting at my dining room table, which is filled with all my CDs. Here, I've got to clean up this CD mess. But I've got this nice little CD called Carmina Burana. It's Carl Orff and Philip Glass and I. Carmina Burana, music composed by Carl Orff, produced by Philip Glass, the classical musician, and Kurt Munkazi, arrangements by Ray Manzarek, musicians Ray Manzarek, etc., etc., etc. It's on CD, and it's one of my favorite albums, and it exists, and you can probably get it in, one of your local record stores, or certainly order it. Carmina Burana, it's on A&M. I did another record called The Golden Scarab, that's also available on CD. I'm very pleased with The Golden Scarab. Tony Williams, the jazz drummer, Larry Carlton, jazz guitar player, and we do a whole mythological journey, a psychedelic psychic journey of a young man to his manhood. So those two albums are available: The Golden Scarab, Carmina Burana, all the X records. I produced the first 4 X records: Los Angeles, Wild Gift, Under the Big Black Sun, and More Fun in the New World. So those are my production fun with X. What a fabulous band. Exene Cervenka, John Doe, Billy Zoom, and DJ Bonebreak, the best punk rock band to ever exist. And I may be a bit prejudiced, folks, but I'm sorry, they're the best. And I include The Clash. Now, you may clash with this, but I include the X as being better than the Clash, and certainly better than the Sex Pistols, although Sex Pistols were an amusement, Malcolm McLaren amusement, but musicianship, well. I mean, really. But X, and if you're not into X, just get Los Angeles and Wild Gift. It's on one CD, and you'll hear two of the hottest punk rock albums you've ever heard. And now I'm working on a couple of film scripts. I'm trying to put my UCLA degree to work already. I figure it's about time now that the new millennium is approaching. It's time to actually direct a movie or two. So I've got a couple of scripts in the work, and hopefully something will happen within the next year. But then here in Hollywood, everyone's got a script in the works, and everyone wants to direct. So I'm just part of that business. And in the meantime, I'm making music with Michael McClure, beat poet, friend of Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, and a very good friend of Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison, perhaps Jim Morrison's mentor in poetry. Michael and I work together. He reads his poetry, and I play music to his poetry. I play his poetry. I have it on the music stand, and I play exactly what he's reading. I do my musical interpretation of it. And we do that around the country and play in coffee houses and hipper clubs and colleges and like that around the country. And I'm also working on some music, and I'm trying to do some with some Indian musicians, fooling around at the moment, and hopefully we can get it on the disc, some Indian ragas, keyboard ragas with tabla and tambura and a sitar player, and I've got a wonderful violinist that I'm playing with, Kala Ramnath, and she's just great. So I may be doing some keyboard ragas. That would be fun, actual, and treating the keyboard as an Indian instrument. That'll be a lot of fun. And I'm going to eventually, then maybe I'll do some solo keyboard, or maybe just some things with a guitar player. I've got a good friend, a Japanese guitarist, and he's just so mellow and so cool that we may do some vaguely, far lesser versions of Bill Evans and Jim Hall, that kind of thing, that Underwater, that great album of theirs. We may do something like that, keyboard and guitar improvisations. And then eventually I'm going to get into doing some electronica, some acid jazz, drums and bass. That's what I want to do next. I want to get into and do the bamboo jungle. I'm going to do some jungle, but it's going to be the bamboo jungle. So those are my plans for the future. That and another book. Actually, I've been thinking about working on another book, a book of fiction, in which a rock star stages his own death. And it's now 30 years later, and the rock star has sent me a couple of cryptic postcards asking for my help. He's come out of hiding, and I'm going to go and find him and find out the whole story of this journey to the East, a fictionalized spiritual odyssey of a rock star who staged his own death.
I wonder where you got the inspiration for that, right? But speaking of that, I heard many years ago that some American station had some Jim Morrison impersonator pretend to come back from Africa and stage a press conference at the... You didn't hear anything about that?
I missed that one, unfortunately. But there are certainly a lot of Jim Morrison imitators out there, and certainly a lot of tribute bands, Doors tribute bands. And I know we have a good half dozen in the States. You guys have got a few down there, and it wouldn't be very difficult to take one of those fellows and say, why not? Let's try it. It started with a guy named the Phantom way back, about 1976, I believe. And actually, it started within 2 months after Jim Morrison was buried. Somebody came up to me, and I'll never forget this. A guy comes up to me and he says, "Jim's not dead, is he, Ray?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" "Of course he's dead, man. He's buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery." And he said, "Oh, no. That coffin had 150 pounds of sand in it, and you know the truth, but you're not saying. You know he's not dead, don't you, man?" I said, "Oh, come on, man." 2 weeks later, another guy and his girlfriend come up to me, and the two of them say, "We've heard Jim's not dead. Is it true, Ray?" And that within 2 months of his death, he was still alive, and it took off. It just took off. And now I'm still living with it. I'm still answering, "Is he really dead?" And I say, "No, yes, he's dead." And they say, "You have to say that, don't you, man?" I said, "Okay, you got me there. Yeah, he's alive, but I can't tell you where he is. And he's dead, folks. He's dead." one of the best things I heard was, and it came from Australia, this is why I tell you, somebody sent me a letter saying, I know where Jim Morrison is. He's in the outback of Australia. He has a broken leg. Send me 1,500 quid and I'll go and get him and bring him back. I said, no thanks, man. I doubt it.
All right, Ray. Well, thanks very much for your time and good luck with your current projects. And thanks for taking time. I just want to mention the name of the book is Light My Fire, My Life with the Doors. And in Australia, it's published by Random House and it's available at all good bookstores. Thank you very much once again, Ray.
Thank you. My pleasure.